Hi, it's Chad Massaker, president of Carceron here. I'm also the founder and creator of Speakeasy Executive Networking Events and the founder of Aficionados Against Human Trafficking. You may know my other charity, Tap Out Human Trafficking, which is actually a production of Aficionados Against Human Trafficking. That's the actual legal name of the charity. I started Aficionados a while back to actually have some, kind of highbrow, couple $100 plate dinner events and tasting events to raise money to fight human trafficking. Just so happened that the martial arts tournament kind of presented itself first, but it's all under Aficionados Against Human Trafficking. So we're having an event next Thursday at Casino Cristo, 6 p.m., Thursday the 25th, and it's called Bourbon, Lamb, and Stogies. It's sponsored by Maker's Mark, Basil Hayden, and Whistle Pig, as well as Oliva and GTO Cigars. It's going to be an amazing time. We're going to have a couple lambs on a spit roast and have some bourbon and have some cigars and raise money to fight, this horrible, horrible thing that's happening in our city. It's going to benefit two charities. It's going to benefit Aficionados Against Human Trafficking, and those funds will help the operating expenses of the Tap Out Human Trafficking tournament, which will happen in January. But half of the proceeds will also go to Tapestri, which is where Maja Hasic comes in. So, Maja, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I just wanted to spend a few minutes with you and have you explain to everybody, what Tapestri is. It's Tapestri with an I, folks. And then you're the human trafficking expert. So I don't think people know nearly enough about this issue, and I'd like you to just kind of share some things, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So let's start off with, what is Tapestri, how long you've been around, what's the mission, all that sort of thing.
Sure. Tapestri is a nonprofit social service agency. We initially started in 1996 as a project of different organizations. In 2002, we received our own 501c3, became a nonprofit. And then in 2004, we officially started our anti-human trafficking. Initially, when we started, we were a domestic violence program. But when the federal definition of human trafficking came out in 2000, we realized that we were not only dealing with victims of domestic violence, but also of human trafficking. So right now, 2018, we are 14 years in having our anti-human trafficking program. Our mission is to end violence and oppression in the refugee and immigrant communities through education, advocacy, community organizing, and of course direct services to victims of human trafficking and domestic violence.
How did you get into this?
Well, I always knew that I wanted to do something in the human rights field. When I was in college, we had somebody come and present on human trafficking. I couldn't believe that slavery in its form today still existed. And at that point, I knew that I wanted to do something in this field. I wasn't sure what, I wasn't sure when. So when the opportunity presented itself for me to work at Tapestri, I started as a case manager in 2008, and I've been with Tapestri ever since.
That's awesome. Wow. So I don't think a lot of people realize, I still run into people all the time, and I'm sure you do too, that, Atlanta is one of the worst cities for human trafficking in the country. And I think for those people that do know, we're starting to say, there's some improvement, but I think that improvement is fairly marginal. Can you speak as to kind of what the state of, the fight against human trafficking is here in Atlanta?
Sure. You're absolutely correct. Human trafficking is booming in Atlanta and all across the state of Georgia. We have made a lot of progress in the last 5 years. I think specifically due to the training that has been out there, as well as public awareness activities. Now, of course, there are things that could still be improved. Identification of victims, and making a requirement for law enforcement to get training on how to identify potential victims of human trafficking.
Can you give us 3 to 5 ways to identify potential human trafficking victims?
Sure. If an individual is not in possession of their documents, whether they are for a national or a U.S. citizen, for an example, birth certificate, social security number, work permit, passport, that's a pretty good indicator that it could be human trafficking. Why are they not in possession of their documents? Why is somebody else keeping it for them? Our they being accompanied to appointments, whether that's a medical appointment, DMV appointment, whatever it is, by another individual that is speaking for them and making decisions for them. If an individual is unaware of their surroundings, because sometimes traffickers will move them from city to city or state to state. So if they are unaware of where they are currently, that's a pretty good indicator that they could be a potential victim of human trafficking.
And so if we're trying to identify a trafficker, I think we can extrapolate from what you just said in terms of they're probably going to be around with a lot of cash, they're going to be speaking for their victim or their slave, that sort of thing. So that's interesting.
Yes, and they're also going to be making arrangements, work arrangements for that victim as well. If you're not dealing directly, with the person that's going to be providing the service, we're not talking about huge corporations. We're talking about smaller businesses. That could be a pretty good indicator.
What are a couple of things that Tapestri needs that it doesn't have right now in order to be able to do its job better?
Our job being providing services to victims of human trafficking, I think identification is a really big one. If we had more first responders trained on the issue of human trafficking, then we would receive referrals to provide those services much quicker. What we don't want to do is have a victim come forward, seek help, not self-identifying, and then just going into the system, whether that is being arrested or being bailed out by the trafficker, then going back into the trafficking situation and then being referred to us after being in that situation for 5 years. So we want to cut that time short, and we want to prevent human trafficking from happening.
So let's talk about when a victim comes to you. Oftentimes, I guess they'll need housing. How does that work?
Well, housing is a really big problem for Tapestri, and I think many of the organizations doing anti-human trafficking work. We do have a few shelters in the state of Georgia that work specifically with victims of sex trafficking, but not that many work with victims of labor trafficking, male or female, or even adults. If I could ask for anything, from partners, it would be some way to resolve this housing issue, whether that is for Tapestri to have a house where victims can be placed short term until they can get on their feet, or some type of a partnership with an apartment complex that will allow us to place our clients without having to do the background check or at a lower rate.
It's funny you mentioned labor trafficking, and I think that whenever we hear about human trafficking, I think everybody's brain kind of defaults to sex trafficking. Can you speak as to the labor trafficking issues in Georgia?
Sure. I would say that currently 50% of our caseload is made up of labor trafficking cases. 50%. An overwhelming number of those cases are agricultural cases, so individuals that are working on our farms and that are being trafficked for that labor. We do have a few other types of labor trafficking cases, but agriculture is I would say, our biggest component.
And so, I'm making an assumption, I didn't realize there's probably a housing shortage all the way around, but I'm making an assumption that there's probably more housing resources for female victims than male.
That is a great assumption. We do not have any shelters specific for male victims of human trafficking, whether that is sex or labor. There are, of course, homeless shelters, but what we try to do at Tapestri is create a stable environment for a victim so that they can get on their feet and they can re-enter society.
Well, and oftentimes these guys don't have any documentation to prove who they are. There's no credit, right? Male or female, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Even if they had legal status in the United States, if they had something, it would take a while to get those documents. When somebody is discovered or runs away from their trafficker, we need placement right then and there. We don't want them to stay in that situation because they feel they have no other choice.
We're going to start winding down our time, but I want to finish with two things. The first is, we have an election coming up. We're about to elect a new governor. If you could sit down with this new governor after November, or I guess it'd be January when the term starts, and say, here's the two things I really need you to address as governor to start really making changes here on human trafficking in Georgia, what would they be?
It would be a requirement for law enforcement and first responders, medics, EMT, to have training on human trafficking. I would also suggest changes in our vacating convictions law. So for example, if somebody is arrested for a crime that is related to their trafficking situation, if that's something they were forced to do, to have that cleared from their record so they can have an opportunity to start a life without a felony hanging over their head.
So just so we're clear, the last point, I think what I just heard you say is we should quit punishing victims.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea too. Sounds smart. All right, so we have this event coming up. It's going to be basically about just shy of a week from today, next Thursday. People are going to come out. We're going to have cigars, have drink some bourbon, have some lamb, have a good time. But at the end of the day, it's still a fundraiser. I'll repost this video for people that may forget after the event. But I'd like you to maybe give some people that come to this event a little bit of homework once they leave the event. They need to be doing, maybe 1 to 3 things in the first 7 days after the event to help, do something about this. What would that be?
Sure. Visit us on our website, www.tapestri.org. You can make a contribution that way. You can also reach out to us to request a training. We do free trainings for businesses, corporations, faith-based communities, just anybody and everybody that is willing to listen to us and learn about human trafficking and how to identify potential victims. I would also say support Tap Out Human Trafficking. You guys support us, have supported us for over 5 years in different capacities. So we want to make sure that you're still around to support us for another 10 years.
Yeah, me too. So we're going to wrap up. Just a reminder that the event is Bourbon, Lamb, and Stogies. It's sponsored by Basil Hayden, Maker's Mark, Whistle Pig, and GTO and Oliva Cigars. Also Casina Christos and the Vineyard Wine Market. Christos has the lamb, and the Vineyard Wine Market supplying the wine. It's next Thursday, the 25th at 6 p.m. Come early, prepare to hang out outside. We'll have a nice fire pit, and we'll talk more about this then, and have a good time.